Welcome to Moments with Marianne. Allow me to interrupt your train of thought with something that may be one of the most interesting things you hear today. This is Marianne-pestana, and we're here today to talk with Peter Russell, the author of Letting Go of Nothing. Relax your mind and discover the wonder of your true nature. Now, Peter earned degrees in theoretical physics, psychology, and computer science at the University of Cambridge in England, where he studied for a time with Stephen Hawking. He studied meditation and Eastern philosophy in India and later conducted research into neural physiology of meditation. So let's welcome to the show, Peter Russell.
Lovely to be with you, Marianne.
My goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. It has me wondering, what even got you interested in this topic?
I think it's been there in a way all my life. It's been a theme which I've been exploring and going deeper and deeper. It started, I think, when I first started practicing meditation many, many years ago. I realized that the essence of meditation was really letting go as opposed to trying to get anywhere. And it's just been a theme that's just deepened, and I've explored it in different ways of what helps letting go, different ways of letting go, and how to facilitate it. So it's been a sort of lifelong exploration, really. And I decided it was finally time to sort of pull together my own understanding and experiences.
I'm sure you had a lot of people asking you about this topic because, it's such a big, hot topic right now. We've got so many people that are looking to, just kind of maybe in some ways reinvent themselves or work through things that have kept them stuck in the past.
Yes. The times we're going through, there's so much change, and people are sort of being asked to change or just having to adapt to new situations. And, letting go of whether it's, past ways of doing things or future expectations, it just comes up again and again for people. I hear people say, I wish I could just let go of that, or I need to let go of this. But we're not really ever given any sort of education or instruction on how to do it. We just try to do it. And I think what I've found over the years is trying to let go of something is almost the opposite. It doesn't really happen.
Yeah, I can probably attest to that too. I know, there's things that people say, well, you try this practice or that practice and it will work. And, sometimes it seems that nothing's working. And that kind of brings me full circle because, titling your book, Letting Go of Nothing, how did that come to be?
It's almost the opposite of letting go of everything. It just came to me one day as a sort of, it was really, the idea was, it's not quite nothing, it's letting go of no thing. It's a sort of play on words, it's letting go of no thing. Because we think, what we're letting go of is I've got to let go of this, whatever it is, this job or this attachment to a relationship or my expectation of what's going to happen tomorrow, whatever it is. But we're not actually letting go of things. We're not even really letting go of thoughts or feelings. What we're letting go of is a way of seeing things. We're letting go of a mindset, which psychological term, which really means the lens through which we see things. So we're not letting go of anything in itself, but really how we see things. And that's what it means, is what we're letting go of is an attitude, an attachment, really. An attachment is something in the mind of how we look at things. So it's really about a change of mind. So that's where the title came from. So yes, there are many areas of life where we need to let go, but then there's a subtler meaning, and this was part of when the title came to me. What we're letting go to is we're not letting go to anything else. We're just letting go, and often when there's letting go, there's a sense of ease, relief, openness. So we're letting go in a sense to an openness, in that sense that there's a nothingness we're letting go to. So, it had several meanings for me. I know it's provocative, I know.
Yes, it is. That's why I had to ask you about that. Well, and because that really makes, perfect sense when you explain it that way, because I'm sure a lot of people go, well, letting go of nothing. My goodness, right. What could that be?
Right.
So why do people have such a hard time letting go of anything?
Ah, I think it's we get attached to a particular belief, or sometimes just a feeling or thought or whatever. We become attached to things, and the reason we get attached to something or other is that deep down we believe we're going to be better for it. We're going to feel better. That it's going to help us in some way, and so that's why we get attached to something. Like if it's a belief in how I should behave or how someone else should behave. Deep down, there's a feeling if this happens, then I will feel better. My life will be better. Something like that. Or if we get attached to something we're doing in the world, the same thing. We feel that this is going to make me feel better, and feeling better. Something I show in the book. Ultimately, that's what we all want. What we're all looking for is ultimately how to be happier, how to be more at peace in ourselves, more content. And so our attachment is so strong because we think whatever it is we're holding on to, we think the holding on is going to make us feel better. The irony is that so often the actual holding on to something, holding on to an idea or connection or whatever it is, we feel worse because it creates tension. It can start creating uncomfortable feelings, and just the very idea, just the holding on is an uncomfortable experience. And then we get into frustration of how do we let go, etc. So, I mean, put it shortly, we hold on because we think in one way or another we're going to feel better for whatever it is we're holding on to, and yet the irony is we often feel the opposite. We feel worse, more tense, more worried or whatever.
Do you think people hold on because they've developed this habit also of being able to just kind of, go through the kind of almost going through the motions of holding on to what they're having problems with?
Yes, it is very much a habit, and we often don't even think that there's another possibility. So, yes, we get caught up in something. This is the way we've always done things. That sort of habit. So that's certainly part of it. Yes.
So what's the first step someone can take to kind of realizing that, hey, something's not working and I need to start letting things go?
Right. What I do in the book, I reframe letting go as letting in, first of all, and then letting be, which may sound the opposite of what we want, because we think letting go, if I want to let go of some emotion, say, that's getting in my way that I feel is, not helping me, we think it's about, I need to get rid of this emotion. But that's why letting go often seems difficult, because, we try to push it away and it won't go away. So what I found in my own life is the first step is to actually do the opposite, to let it in. And so if there's some emotion, say you're feeling angry at somebody, that's something we can all relate to from time to time. The first thing I suggest people do is actually to go to the body, to tune into the body and notice how it feels to be angry. Notice what's going on in the body, because with any emotion, there's always some bodily sensation. With anger, it may actually be very noticeable. There may be a sort of clenching of the fists or teeth or something. But there's always something going on. Sometimes it's much more subtle. It may just be a slight feeling of discomfort, whatever. So first of all, go to the body and notice what's going on there. Just being curious to say, okay, what's it like when I feel angry? Just noticing the different things, just sort of, and almost saying, is there anything else here I haven't noticed? So you really get to notice the feelings that are there. And this begins to soften things a little bit. And the second side of any uncomfortable emotion is there's always some, what I call story there. There's something we are telling ourselves about the situation. So if it's anger, say, the story might be, this person didn't behave the way I think they should have behaved in order for, me to be happy. This person, something happened, it may not even be a person, but something is disturbing my life in some way, is interfering with my life, stopping me getting what I'm wanting. And so beginning to look at that story as well, letting that in, letting the story in, just seeing what you're telling yourself. And sometimes, you might even begin to see, well, yes, there's a truth to this, but also, there's another side to this story. And if there's another side to the story, you may begin to see, well, what was this person thinking? What were they feeling? What was going on with them? And if you begin to see another side to the story, it's this thing, you're taking another point of view. You're beginning to see things differently. And that again can lead to a softening of the emotion. And so this is the first step, just letting in the feelings that are there, letting in whatever you're telling yourself, and then not trying to change them. Not trying to get rid of the sensation in the body, or not trying to get rid of what you're telling yourself, but letting them be, just seeing them as they are. And what usually happens, most of the time I find what happens is it begins to soften. As you see it, it begins to soften and begins to dissolve. It may not go away completely, but it begins to decrease and doesn't control you so much. And then maybe you can begin to see what's going on, see what you need to do. So that's the basic thing that I suggest to people is, don't think of letting go as trying to get rid of something. That may be the intention in the end, that you no longer are caught up in this feeling, but rather than going straight at it, just straight at the task, do the opposite. Just stop, relax a bit, and just explore what's going on. And there's a line from Jung, which I really like, Carl Jung. He said, what you resist persists. And I think the more we keep stuff out of our mind, the more we block it. We may block the anger because we feel, if I really let this in, I'm going to start hitting people. But actually, if you're just on your own, you just begin to let it in and stop resisting it, you'll find it doesn't persist so much. It begins to soften and dissolve.
Well, and how amazing is that? Because, it seems like we're also going through this kind of, pandemic of people being super anxious,
Yes.
And so that's something that, you could kind of feel when you go out sometimes.
Right. Oh, yes. Definitely. So, the thing here is to feel it in yourself. Again, with, anxiety around, whatever aspect of the pandemic it is again, be curious as to what's going on in the body, just noticing the different sensations that are there. And also, there's obviously a story behind it. You're telling yourself something that's making you feel anxious, and just, looking at that and letting that in. Because a lot of this goes on, not quite in the unconscious, but sort of on the edge of our consciousness. So what we're doing is allowing it more into our consciousness, seeing it for what it is. What happens when we try to shift perspective, where we try to find another way of seeing things, we try to shift our perspective. And what I feel is we each have an inner wisdom, a different way of seeing things deep inside us, but we get so caught up in a particular way of seeing that other ways of seeing can't shine through. And what I found useful in my life is just to ask myself in a very innocent way, just to inquire, could there be, perhaps, who knows, be another way of seeing this situation? Not trying to, but just opening the door and seeing what your deeper knowing presents to you. There's an example. This was years ago when I was first exploring this sort of practice. I was having a difficult situation with my partner at the time. We've just been, one of those things that occurs, we just, for a couple of days, we've been not getting on so well, a little issue. And, I tried letting go of it, and it was still there. And it was irritating me and her, I know. And then I was just sitting there, and I just tried this. It was one of the first times I tried it, really. I just said, okay, let me just ask, is there another way of seeing this situation? Just maybe, who knows, is there another way of seeing this situation? And it was amazing. It was like almost instantly, a second or two, everything shifted. And another way, I suddenly saw the whole thing through a completely different lens, through a completely different way of seeing it. And I began to see here was another human being navigating her way through life with her own needs and background and having to deal with me and all my stuff. And it was instantly love returned. And I just saw, we'd been out of love for a couple of days and love returned. I had compassion for her. And I felt at ease again. It's like, there was a sense of relief and a sense of almost obviousness to it. Of course, that's true. Why hadn't I seen that before? And the reason I hadn't seen it before was I was so caught up in my own particular way of seeing things and what she had to do to change, why she was wrong, what she had to do to change. I was so caught up in that, attached to that belief and idea, that this other way of seeing things just couldn't shine through. And, it's a way of seeing things. When I say it, I'm sure, most people would say, well, of course, yes, here's another human being. Let me have more compassion for her. But I was so caught up in it, I couldn't do it. So the answer to your question really is we need to turn within and just ask ourselves in this very open way, not trying to find an answer, not trying to find another way of seeing things. Just could there perhaps that sort of attitude possibly be another way of looking at this? And sometimes something shifts, sometimes it doesn't. But I feel it's always worth asking. And with it, nearly always what comes is a more loving, compassionate, peaceful way of being with the situation.
And so those are the feelings that are on the other side of letting go?
Yes. I think when we let go, there's nearly always feelings of that nature, feelings of being more at ease, a feeling of relief, relaxation sometimes, or a lightness of being. We don't feel so heavy in our minds, in our emotions. A lightness of being. Sometimes it may even be as strong as a joy or something like that. But generally, what we feel when we let go is the sort of feelings we're looking for the whole time. Just we feel better for it, basically. And as I said earlier, what we're holding on for is to try and feel that. And yet when we let go, we have that begins to come almost immediately, those feelings. So yes, those are the sorts of feelings that really associated with letting go.
Do you feel it's part of human nature that we develop these stories around events that happen just so they make sense to us?
Oh, yes. I think we're meaning-making animals. That's part of what actually makes us, part of our humanness. Our culture is we want to understand things, and so that's really good. But then also we make up stories about things, and then they may be true, they may not be true. But then when we get a story, we like to believe that our story is the right one, and that's partly because, when we make up our stories about things, what's going on in the world, in one way or another, they're stories that are related to our safety, our survival, trying to, help us get through the world and, be safe. And so they become very important stories. It's like, in some way or another, our well-being depends upon this story, and that's why we get attached to it, because we feel without this story, we wouldn't be so safe. So we do build up these stories. I think it is, yes, it's part of how we are as human beings, unfortunately. And as I say, at times they're very useful, but at times we need to see them for what they are and be willing to question them and let go of them.
Yeah, I like how you have that gentle question asking yourself, in regards to the story and just, if there's another way to view this, because I think a lot of times people never get into how someone else is feeling because they're so wrapped up in their feelings.
Right. Yes, exactly. And that's I find an important part of letting go of a story where it involves another person is to just, you can ask yourself, various questions like what might have been going on in their mind? what might have led up to this with them. Maybe they had a bad night. Maybe whatever it was, something else is going on. Or what were they wanting me to do? Because probably they had an expectation of me and how I would behave. And so just questions like this, really what we're doing is putting ourselves in the other person's shoes. And the more we can just do that and imagine how they might have been reacting, how they might have been seeing things, then we begin to release our attachment to our own particular story. Not to say there may not be parts of our story which are accurate and right, but we begin to release our attachment to it by seeing other possibilities. And we just, we don't just be imagining what they might have been feeling. We don't know for certain, but just that act of putting ourselves in their shoes and imagining what might be going on for them, it reduces our holding on to our own particular story.
I know a lot of people are looking at this point in time to let go of things, as we talked about initially. Do you find that, while it's a really hot topic now, that this is something that's been going on for generations?
I think so. Yes, I think it's hotter now because there's, in a way, more to let go of, more change coming. But yes, I think it's always been there all our life. And it's really, if you go back and, look at all the great spiritual traditions of the world, going back, hundreds, thousands of years, they all talk in one way or another about letting go. It's a key part of their wisdom and philosophies. So the fact it's been encouraged for thousands of years suggests to me it's always been an issue there. I mean, that really was the essence of what the Buddha saw in his own sort of journey and awakening. He saw that the problem was our clinging, as he put it, our holding on to our ideas about how things should be, etc. So, yes, it goes back a long way. So I think it's always been there. And maybe, as you say today, it's really coming to a head much more just because we're being faced with more and more change and adjustments that we have to make.
It seems like people are more open to talking about how they feel than ever before. I mean, we're talking about mental health and things like that.
Yes, and that I think is a really important part of just our general cultural shift to talk about feelings. I mean, I know when I was brought up in post-war England, and we didn't talk about feelings. It wasn't something you really talked about. You talked about your ideas, your thoughts, what you wanted, but it wasn't part of the language to actually talk about feelings. And I know for myself, as I grew up, into adulthood, moved through adulthood, I realized I didn't know how to talk about feelings or relate to feelings because I was coming at it from a more sort of mental point of view. If someone said, what do you feel about this situation? I'd probably respond with what I thought about it. I think this person is wrong because they're doing this or that, whatever it is. So I'd respond with some judgment or assessment. And then realizing, no, the word feeling, it actually comes from the body. We feel sensations. We use the word feeling for sensations. This feels hot, this feels cold, this feels sharp, whatever it is. So the word feeling actually comes to the body. And so that was a learning, and still is an ongoing learning for me, is, when you talk about, how are you feeling, I think the first thing to do is to come back to the body. Notice, how am I actually feeling? What's the sensation here? Because the tendency in our mind is to go towards the thought, the story, the judgment, whatever it is. So I think this is something that we're learning in our culture. It's now, people talk much more about their feelings. It's becoming much more of a public discourse, a public language, that people know how to talk about feelings, and that it's okay to talk about feelings as well. I know if I look at my own background, it's like, I think part of the reason people didn't talk about feelings was we didn't really know what the feelings were or know how to talk about them. And so this to me is a really, really important shift that's happening in our culture.
in the 70s, they didn't talk too much about feelings either. So,
but it's changing, right? It's changing.
Oh, thank goodness. Thank
Yes.
goodness. You know, we
Yes.
live in such a great era that these discussions are being had and people can
Yes.
look at things in a new way, you know,
Yeah.
especially with a book like yours. My goodness.
Oh, thank you. The book is really about looking at yourself and looking at what's going on in yourself to really open up to that more.
It would seem something that regardless where anyone is on their path, whether it's someone that's, you know, a CEO in a corporate setting or just, you know, someone who's looking to do some personal development, that this is really like life skills we've never learned.
Exactly. And in fact, I spent about, 15 years or so back in the 80s, late 70s into the early 90s, working with corporate people, working with quite high-level people in various corporations in Europe, beginning to introduce them to this. So this was like the beginning of the human potential movement, as it's often called. And so running seminars, programs for them, beginning to sort of help them look at themselves, something which they had never really done. A few had done, but most hadn't. They're so sort of trained to be with the outer world and the job and, you know, what are your targets, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was just beginning to get them to just be quiet. I mean, just really to begin meditation. I wouldn't use the word meditation because they probably run a mile, but, you know, just as a way of just saying, you know, maybe just be quiet and just sort of close your eyes and notice what's going on. Notice what's going on in your body. Notice what's going on in your mind. But just beginning to help them look inside. And that was quite revolutionary for them back then. Now, of course, it's completely changed. You know, where I am in the Bay Area, you've got, you know, Google and people running courses on this and teaching it to all their people, employees, and teaching it to other corporations. It's now becoming mainstream. But that just shows how much our culture has changed in just the last 40 years or so, something that was really radical. And in fact, I was working with one corporation. I was working with their board. This was actually a major corporation in Europe. I was working with their board and the senior executives. And part of the agreement was I mustn't tell anybody what I was doing. I mustn't tell anybody that I was working with them because they were so concerned that if this got out into the media and the press, they'd be laughed at for doing, you know, this sort of inner exploration. And you know, now it's the opposite. Companies are really proud to announce to everybody, yes, we're doing this. We're doing this for the good of our people. So things really are changing and will keep on changing. I think the more people realize how important this is to really begin to explore and understand ourselves and free ourselves up, because that's what it's all about really, is freeing ourselves up.
Well, the board obviously really understood how important it was for them to get to that place where they're starting to work on themselves. I'm sure they really appreciate you being there.
Yeah. And what they were looking at actually was they realized they had a problem of stress with their senior executives. And so they were looking at how to reduce stress. And it was actually the person in charge of health in HR who brought me in. They were looking at health and stress and just seeing their people getting very stressed and just realizing, you know, you can do exercise and things that certainly helps with stress, but they realized there was a whole inner dimension they needed to explore.
Well, I know you talked about meditation, and in your book, you talk about effortless meditation. I'm sure that probably makes a few people turn their heads. So
it does.
Why don't you expand on that for our listeners?
Yes. I think the common idea about meditation is that, you know, meditation is difficult. It takes a lot of practice, maybe years of practice so you get anywhere. And you've really got to control the mind. You've got to stop thoughts coming in. And this is like very much a common idea that's out there with meditation. And so when you say meditation, it's effortless. People say, well, how come I've tried to meditate and I can't stop thoughts coming in. I get nowhere. I did it for a month or whatever, and nothing really changed. And that's because we're trying to sort of do the meditation, make it happen. Now, there are some techniques. I mean, there's techniques of concentration and other things which they're there in order to develop, particular states or qualities, whatever. They have value. So I'm not saying, all meditation should be effortless, but the sort of meditation that I'm interested in, and I think the sort of meditation that a lot of people, beginners, are interested in, is meditation that allows the mind to settle down. So it's really to allow the mind to become quieter. That's what we're really looking for, because we know we get so busy, so caught up in our thoughts, in our doing. We're looking for a way just to slow down, basically, to slow down and come to a more relaxed state of mind. And there, in that sort of practice, if you start putting effort into it, you're going in the opposite direction. You're trying to make something happen. It's only going to create more tension in the mind, more trying. And so the first thing I, encourage people to do is not to try to get anywhere. So we're not trying to get anywhere. We're just really not fueling the thoughts in the mind. I tend to say it's like a fire. If you keep on adding logs to a fire, it'll keep burning. If you stop adding logs, it'll slowly die down. And it's the same with the mind. If we keep on, following one thought to another, like we do in daily life. I mean, if I look at my daily life, I go from one thought to another thought to another thought to another. They just flow on from one to another. And they keep on, reinforcing each other in some way. But in meditation, what I suggest people do is not to follow the thought, not to try to stop them. Thoughts will come in. They'll keep on coming in. That's the nature of the mind, to come up with thoughts. But in meditation, just making the very simple choice not to follow that thought anymore. We've decided, say we sat down for 10 minutes to meditate. We know we have 10 minutes spare. There's nothing we need to be focused on, worrying about doing for 10 minutes. So when a thought comes up about, what you have to do later in the day, or something that happened yesterday, or whatever it is, you can just make that choice. I'm not going to follow that thought anymore right now. And then maybe another thought will come up, and just choose not to follow it. And then when we step back from the thinking in this way, we just start becoming more aware of the present moment. When you stop following a thought, what you begin to notice is, yes, here I am. And there's the sound of a bird outside, or even, the sound of the refrigerator, or, and I'm noticing this sensation in my body, or just here's my breathing, whatever it is. But I don't ask people to focus on something. Some meditations, you focus on the breath or on the body or on a mantra or something. What I encourage is just to let the mind relax, which is really about letting the attention relax. So rather than focusing in, it's almost doing the opposite. It's like letting the focus zoom out. I mean, so often we zoom in on something, but it's letting the attention soften and zoom out, and just a sort of open awareness of just being here in the present moment. And as I say, thoughts will come back in. And when you notice the thoughts come back in, just make that choice. Okay, right now, I'm not going to follow you any further. I can do that later, and just come back to just being here in the present moment. And as you do this, as I say, it's like, you stop putting logs on the fire. As you stop following the thoughts, what you find is gradually the mind settles down of its own accord. You don't have to do anything to make the mind quiet. On its own, the mind will settle down into a quieter, more peaceful state. So what we're learning in meditation is learning how to allow that to happen rather than trying to make it happen. And it's also, just to point out, it's not about also trying to keep the mind quiet. You can't do that. I mean, another thing that beginners often find is, this is lovely, I've got to stay here. And that, you won't. You'll keep on coming out. It's not about learning how to stay quiet. For me, the essence of the practice is learning how to return to a state of greater quietness, and return. And then just, as I say, gradually then the mind just settles down. So that's the sort of beginner's practice that I encourage people to do. Very, very simple, but catching any effort. And if you notice yourself trying or wanting something, just seeing that as another thought, and just, letting it go. If you find yourself trying, just letting the trying go, just letting the mind relax again. So it's really all about just allowing the mind to relax, not trying to make it relax, but allowing it to relax. I don't know if that makes sense. It's
It
a different,
does.
it's a different approach from what most people think, but I find it's much more effective when I, lead people in that. Very often, the very first session, they get it. It's like, yes, I see what you're saying. Yes, this does feel better. This does feel easier. And that's what we're looking for in meditation, just how to feel more quiet and at ease in ourselves and less tense and less wound up about things.
Well, gosh, and what a gentle way to approach that, because I can remember when I started meditating, I'm sitting there and going, have I been meditating? Is it 5 minutes already? Oh, shoot, I'm thinking, not supposed to be thinking. So you go into this thought process, and it's the way that you do it is actually kind of real exciting, because it sounds like this is what you were teaching CEOs too.
Yes. Yeah, it's changed, obviously, just as I've learned, better ways of teaching, but that's the essence of what I was teaching them. Definitely, just how to let the mind relax. But as you said, we think, I've gone wrong because I've got a thought coming in. But just say, no, thoughts will come in. You ask a really experienced meditator, do you ever have thoughts? Ask the Dalai Lama, do you ever have thoughts in meditation? Say, yes, but I don't let them bother me. I don't get caught up in them. I don't hold on to them. They come in and then they go out. They're like, I think the analogy that's often used is like clouds passing by in the sky. And they come and then we just don't follow them any further. We let them go and just come back to being here in the present moment. And that's really what it's about, is coming back to being in the present moment. And to say, not focusing on the present moment, but just that very open, relaxed awareness. Here I am, and this is my experience right now.
Do you know what's interesting? In your book, you talk about there's no such thing as ego. I mean, you've got all these things that people are like going, wait a minute,
Right.
stop the press. That can't be true.
Right. And deliberately provocative. When I say there's no such thing as ego, the emphasis is on thing. And I'm not talking about, what psychologists call, a healthy ego in terms of a sense of self-worth, that sort of thing. I'm talking about, when people say my ego, or my ego made me do that, or my ego thinks this, or this is my ego getting in the way, or whatever, or that person has a strong ego, they're very egotistical. So we treat ego as something, as if there's some part of me called the ego. There's some part of me, a different part of me that is coming up and getting in the way or whatever. But if I look inside myself, I don't actually find some different part of me. When I look inside myself, what I do find is there's this sense of me that's always there, this sense of just me, that is, we all know that sense of I am, here I am, that sense of presence. And along with that, I may find lots of different thoughts and feelings, and some of those thoughts may be egocentric thoughts. And that's going on, and maybe egocentric judgments about things and egocentric desires, and maybe feelings that come from that point of view, the ego's point of view. So what I see is the ego is not a thing. It's actually a mode of thinking. It's a way of thinking about things. So it comes back to where we started, really say it's a mindset. The ego is a mindset. It's a lens through which we look at the world. So it's not actually a thing. And its view of the world basically is how to keep me safe. It's the ego's job, I call it the ego, but this way of thinking, the ego mind, the job of the ego mind is to think about things in such a way that it ensures that we are safe, we are comfortable, we survive, those sorts of things. That's its job. Now, there are times when that's very useful, the times when we need to be thinking about ourselves, making sure we're safe and secure. But a lot of the time this comes up when it's totally unnecessary. We may be thinking about what might happen tomorrow. Will this be okay? Will I be okay? Am I going to be judged or criticized or whatever? And this mode of thinking jumps in. and starts making us worry, feel anxious, feeling tense or whatever. And letting go, so when we come to letting go of ego, it's not about getting rid of something. Again, if, people often say, oh, I've got to, get rid of my ego, let go of my ego, or transcend my ego, or beat it, or whatever. If we don't see it as some other part of me to be beaten or conquered or whatever, but if we just see it as a way of thinking that we get caught in, then it's much easier. We can just choose to step out of it. When I notice myself getting caught up in some particular egoic thought pattern or something, when I recognize that, I can just choose to pause it. Like in meditation, I can just choose to say, okay, right now, I'm not going to follow you anymore because I can see this is going to just lead me into more worry, whatever it is. I can just choose not to follow it. So letting go of ego starts becoming an ongoing practice in the day that we can do repeatedly. We can let go of ego here, we can let go of it there, rather than something we work on for years and years and finally come to some state where we're completely beyond ego. I mean, that can happen. But we can just step out of the ego and be a little bit beyond ego many times a day. So that to me is, the real reason for saying there's no such thing as ego, partly to see that, there isn't actually a part of me. There's no inner entity. There's a separate entity called ego. It's just a way of thinking. But also, when we approach it that way, then the whole task of letting go of ego becomes an ongoing practice rather than some sort of far off goal.
Yeah, because I know you have, but I know I've often heard people talk about their ego in a way that's like, okay, we got to get rid of this.
Yeah.
As opposed to maybe it's something that's helping them on their journey and something that they can control.
Absolutely. It's actually an ally. People think of the ego as an enemy. It's an enemy. I've got to get rid of it. It's getting in my way. It's actually an ally. It's there to help us. It's there to help us get through life. It's just that a lot of the time it's not necessary and isn't really helping us. And so seeing it this way, we can just see that when it comes in, when that voice comes in, telling us, got to do this, got to do that, and we can see it's not really necessary at this time, then we can just make that choice not to follow it, just to leave it behind. But it's there to try and help us. But most of the time, it's actually doing the opposite.
I can understand that. I know in your book you talk about forgiveness. How does this dovetail with, being able to let go?
Yeah. Forgiveness really is, we think of forgiveness, initially, the sort of common idea is, I'm going to forgive you. You did wrong. I'm going to forgive you for what you did means I'm going to let you off. I won't punish you this time. I'll forgive you. It's like, I'll turn a blind eye, whatever it is. I forgive you because, you did something wrong. The way I see forgiveness is we're not forgiving someone else so much, but we're letting go in ourselves. We're letting go of usually some judgment or grievance. It's our thought about what the other person did that was wrong. So we have some judgment of how they should have behaved, some grievance about they did this and, I'm feeling upset because of what they did. And then we hold on to the judgment or grievance, often a long time after it's passed. Sadly, we human beings are very good at holding on to some grievance. I still can't forgive this person for what they said last month or last year or whatever it is. The other person probably doesn't even know we can't forgive them. They're living their life. And here we are caught up in some grievance of what they did wrong. So our judgments and grievances are really affecting us more than the other person. And so I see forgiveness as really letting go of the judgment, the grievance, whatever it is we're holding on against the other person, just letting that go in ourselves. And when we do, as we've been saying, we feel better. So the person who benefits from forgiveness is ourself, because we stop winding ourselves up about the other person and what they did wrong, what they should have done, blah, blah, blah. When we let go of that, we feel better in ourselves. And so that's the real value of forgiveness.
When we look at forgiveness, I know a lot of times people have a hard time forgiving themselves. How does
Yes.
that work?
I think, yes, the same thing applies here. When we're forgiving someone else, we're sort of letting go of the judgments about them. But forgiving ourselves is, letting go of whatever it is we're telling ourselves that we should have done better or could have done, something like that. There's usually something there that we didn't do things right, I could have done better, something of that nature. And again, just seeing that behind all of this, actually, we all do the best we can the whole time. We all do the best we can, maybe with limited information or being caught in, some emotional upset. We don't, we make certain statements or judgments. But seeing that, actually we're doing the best we can, and then seeing, what was going on in us again. Just, understanding ourselves was, I say, not quite putting ourselves in the other person's shoes, putting ourselves in our own shoes and seeing, okay, what was happening there in the background? Why did I say that? And begin to let go of it. And also, when we're not forgiving ourselves, again, that first step of letting go is noticing the tension in the body. When we're not forgiving ourselves, there's nearly always some tension in the body. So I would say, the first thing to do is come back to the body, notice what's going on, that tightness, and there's probably some sort of tightness in the mind as well, because you're holding on to something, and beginning to let that go. And when we do, we can just again find it's like we can be more relaxed. It's not saying, what we did was okay. It was like, that's what happened. But that's in the past, and just letting go of the holding on to it. But that is important as well, is forgiving ourselves as well as forgiving other people. And even, if there's areas where we can't forgive ourselves for something or forgive other people, we can go one step more. And can we forgive ourselves for not being able to do that? If we're really stuck in something, there's a level of forgiveness there. Can I actually say, okay, I can see, for the moment, I'm stuck in this point of view, but okay, that's how things are. I can sort of forgive myself for not being forgiving in a paradoxical way. And then as we do that, probably we sort of relax a bit more. Maybe the forgiveness comes a bit later.
Oh, that's amazing, because it really allows you to take baby steps to get there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one thing, and coming back to sort of just letting go of feelings, often we touched on this earlier, we resist what we're feeling. We resist some emotion because, we don't want to let it in. We don't want to feel it because we're worried about what might happen if I'm sad. If I let it in, I might start blubbing in public or something. But often, if we can feel the resistance, it's the same thing. If we go back a step and feel how we're resisting that particular feeling, notice how it feels to be resisting, then the resistance itself begins to drop away, and we can be more in touch with what is actually there. So it's a similar thing to the forgiveness thing. It's like taking it back one step. So if we're finding a feeling is difficult to let go of, first of all, look at the resistance that's there and begin to let go of the resistance to actually feeling the feeling. Because that's what we want, is to feel it, but the resistance is getting in the way. So that's what I like to do with people. Just take them back a step and say, okay, what's stopping you, feeling this properly, the resistance, or what's stopping you forgiving somebody? Then just notice that, and as you say, forgive yourself for that. It just all of this just makes the process easier.
Peter, where can our listeners connect with you, be part of your community, and learn more about your work?
Right. The first place is my website, which is just peterrussell.com, with 2 L's on Russell, not the French way, 2 L's on Russell, peterrussell.com. And you can contact me directly there from the site. I've got lots and lots of articles, previous books as well, lots of videos. There's meditations. There's a meditation course there. There's online meetings I run. Yeah, as with most people, that's that's the main starting point. In a way, everything's there on the site, and then from there, choose where you want to go, or if you want to get in touch with me, whatever. But I think there's lots of things there I hope people will find helpful.
Well, there's lots there that I was kind of going, my goodness, I got to read into this, because again, you've got very provocative topics on your website as well. Well, Peter, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It's been a joy. It really has. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Peter. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Letting Go of Nothing. Relax your mind and discover the wonder of your true nature. Letting Go of Nothing's available to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And again, support our indie bookstores. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.